Good morning, good afternoon from a packed InfoComm in Orlando. You join us in the AV Nation studio with a panel of esteemed colleagues, invitees, my older brothers basically. We're here for the day, so we thought we may as well impart some experience and wisdom to everybody at the same time and talk about one of the biggest chestnuts in the AV industry at the moment, which is global support and enterprise infrastructure and how they can be really properly maintained and developed and nurtured by the industry itself. And we have with us from the end, sounds awful to say it, but from the right to the left, Bill Tinnel, who is CEO of Utelogy Corporation. We have, it's such a wonderful name, you know, Robert Jeffrey Fairbanks, Global Head of IT Operations, Bloomberg LP. Jeff Fairbanks, for the sake of us being more colloquial in this sort of. John Masters, who's Business Development and Marketing Director for AVMI. And the quite wonderful Mr. Abdul Chaudhri, whose surname we've been discussing at great length because it means so many things, who is Director of Strategic Accounts Biamp. And of course the great thing about our panel is they look as though they're business executives, but there's so much more than that. Their presence and their names belie experience and so many other things that you wouldn't believe, which I hope we're going to coax out in the next 30 minutes. So if you can stay with us, it'll be fantastic. Now then, this golden chestnut of enterprise support, which is the sort of title we came, how do you deploy and manage enterprise AV successfully? And I've always had a problem with it, enterprise or global AV. And of course, you're representing Jeff, as you with Bloomberg, an organisation, you're now at the top, having started off with AV with the support of the CIO and the C-suite level, and you've just expanded. You're a great example of AV's taken over IT and expanded, unbelievably. And now you're in a huge position of power, if you don't mind me saying so. And now you're in this fantastic position to think enterprise-wide and globally about how the company needs support and how it plans for it.
Absolutely.
What are the challenges you're looking at the moment?
I mean, power and responsibility, right? I mean, coming from the AV world and having the investment by the senior leaders in the firm around the idea that AV is a mission-critical aspect of everything that we do at Bloomberg. If you zoom out, my new remit, my landscape, is to support 192 offices in 73 countries and 19,000 employees, and then the 320 some odd thousand customers that we have every day. That's the remit, our responsibility. And the way we do that is, we have 5,000 engineers spread out around the world, and collaboration, that keyword, that buzzword collaboration, is part and parcel to everything that makes us able to deliver a product at the cycles that we need to for our end users. And so when we look at this global landscape, right now we're undergoing a Workplace of the Future initiative where we've actually gone out and we've done we've looked at all the data points that we can collect against our employee population, from end user surveys, observations, hard data that we capture from tickets and issues that were resolved in the environment, and then also hard data from sensors that are in our conference spaces and collaboration spaces. We've taken all of that and we've laid it against this map around experiences. And so when we talk about the enterprise, at least at Bloomberg, the traditional model was we've got collaboration spaces, we've got conference rooms, and we've got desk spaces. Okay. Then we kind of had this reactive model where, okay, we're going to build these open collaboration spaces or these huddle rooms as a reaction. Now we've moved away from that and we said, you know what? The real driving factor is, what does it take for our employees and our customers to be productive? Let's not focus on the technology or the cool new gadgets. Let's not focus on building more conference rooms or being able to schedule those conference rooms. Let's focus on what is it that our end users need to be the most productive in the spaces that they're in during the course of the day that they're trying to be productive, and then build solutions, holistic IT, AV solutions around those experiences, those vignettes, those needs, and understanding that our employee population is nomadic. They're going to move. Right? And so how do we build a landscape, an architecture, an environment that supports this collaboration as they move through that environment? in these various workflow vignettes.
Is this something that can scale easily, or do you find it difficult? It's just, a model that you have to react to locally rather than scale globally.
The thing that we're finding, actually the exciting thing that we're finding is it is actually more scalable than our traditional model, which was standardize everything, roll it out evenly across the entire world, and then we can support it, right? When you look at the employee use case and you say, instead of saying in America we're going to build conference rooms and we're going to build those conference rooms across the world, we're going to say these employees work this way. They are collaborative, they sit on beanbags, and they use laptops, right? So the solution that employee profile needs is different than the executive that sits at their desk and focuses on working at a desktop computer. Let's build spaces across the world that meet these needs. And then as we look at the employee population that inhabits that geography, we'll build the solutions that meet that employee. So we can have room standards A through F and technology standards A through F, or technology standards 1 through 3. And in Azerbaijan, it may be A room type, but technology 2. Where in Hong Kong, it's B room type and technology 1. And you build this matrix that you can easily standardize and deploy around the world and scale easily, while keeping the focus on what is it the user experience, what is the productivity model that best suits the end user. Because at the end of the day, what we were finding is, yes, we standardize these rooms, they're great, they're consistent, they work across the world, but if the end user is not using it in the way that we intended it for it to be used, is it the most productive space? If you're booking the conference room, not because you want a conference room, but because you want a private place to talk, right, we don't need technology in that private room. And it doesn't have to be a 6-person conference room. It can be a 2-person phone booth that you can sit and have a private conversation with, and we can focus our energies on building no-tech spaces as well as super high-tech spaces, but really focus on delivering the technology and the environment that meets the needs of the end user.
Bill, is that some sort of support vision you have to work out for yourself? Can you adapt to it, or how do you approach it?
So it's interesting. If you look at the contemporaries in Jeff's space, they haven't figured out how to use data yet. And I think as we start to understand how data plays a part in this picture and how we can use the old IT KPI strategies, just what is it that we're going to measure, and we're going to what that value is that we're going to measure, we're going to then execute upon, right? So we're going to say, we're going to take a look at the use of rooms across our space, and we're going to find that people are booking 8-person conference rooms, but on average, there's only 3 people in the room. Why are they doing that? There's a lot of questions that come from the raw data, and until we start looking at the data is one thing, but asking the questions of the data as to why those things start to take place, we can't really understand how to execute on the data that's being provided. So a lot of firms don't have a data strategy, and they certainly don't have a way to look at the data on day 2. But as this workforce is changing, just having open spaces everywhere, we find is not working.
Nope.
And we find that just putting a ton of huddle spaces everywhere, that's not working. So it's because we're not looking at data plus the why that we're not being successful in just in the way we're deploying room systems. But if we take a step back and say, all right, the data is telling us this, ask the questions why, and again, going and looking at productivity and saying, we want, we know if we have 16,000 employees, that a 6-minute time to meeting is equivalent of $200 million in lost productivity annually. That's 200 and something employees that you could have put in some other role and had them be useful, that you're losing by just having that 6-minute. And why is it? And some of it's technology, some of it's just social, but understanding what the data is telling us and trying to apply it to how we're designing rooms, deploying rooms, et cetera, at a global space.
It's really becoming a data game, isn't it, really? But I'm just wondering if people are set up to really utilize data properly.
At the risk of being in violent agreement, you're 100% you're 100% correct. it is stunning when I talk to my peers, when I go look at other environments, just to level set ourselves or benchmark ourselves against our peers. People have this perception of data. I'm measuring the number of people in a conference room. Okay, yeah, okay, that's a data point for sure. But what are they doing in the conference room? Well, I don't know. How long are they staying in the conference room? Well, I don't know. But I know that they booked the conference room, and I know that they used it. Okay, well, that's great. That's one step, but that's not where the power is. The power is in understanding how they're using that technology. If they're using a conference space and you know that there's a 3-person room and they're using it with 3 people, but they're never using the display in the room, do you have that data point? And if so, why aren't they using the display? Oh, it's because they're bringing laptops? Well, then you don't need a display. So you can save yourself. And then if you extrapolate that over, 1,147 rooms that we have, well, then that's 1,147 displays I don't have to buy or maintain or put on the network. That's 1,147 patch points I don't have to do, or expand my switch infrastructure to support those patches, or have monitoring on those devices, or have EOL processes, or have capital and OpEx to hang them and replenish them. I mean, and the list goes on. But it's getting that data and then asking those critical questions at the inception of collection of the data, and then after you collect the data and you synthesize that raw data. So my last 2 hires weren't in the AV space, weren't at networks, weren't in IT infrastructure at all. My last 2 hires were data scientists. The last 2 people I hired were data scientists, because I need someone to be able to tell me how to look at these, to tell me what to look at, how to look at it, and then synthesize it in a way that I can understand it, visualize it in a way I can understand it, so I can take action on it.
Is the industry going to have to provide data in products and in the way the services it offers more easy to help you do that? What role is in it? You were going to say something.
I was going to say that he mentioned a lot of things, but HVAC plays a role in it.
Absolutely.
Like power plays a role in it. Furniture plays a role in it. So if you,
100%.
so those things, when you zoom out on your global strategy, all those things correlate and at the end to the data of what people are using. If I have an SX80 in the room and they come in, they just Skype and go away, and that SX80 didn't do anything for a year, do I know that?
Right.
So that just becomes a bigger
100%.
conversation.
And a lot of what's been talked about, people reference meeting rooms because by volume they are the biggest thing that gets deployed. But actually with many organizations, we see the dollar value can be even greater in other applications, so command and control spaces, event spaces, auditoriums, and really when you talk about the user experience that you're trying to track, of course it's a very varied user experience in all of these different kind of spaces. So the AV challenge, setting a global strategy that isn't just meeting rooms, because you're managing a whole lot of experiences outside of just meeting rooms. It's a real challenge, and so I think for us, as a system integrator, we've used a definition on enterprise that are those organizations that have a scale that is such that they need a degree of organization strategy and repeatability, and that might be global. It doesn't actually have to be. There's some pretty huge organizations, that are not international even, maybe just here in the US or in the UK or wherever. And so it's really trying to say, how does the manager of that within the organization formulate a strategy that can genuinely be applied globally? How can they succeed? So Jeff, it's interesting, you mentioned 2 data hires. I was wondering, how many guys do you have in your team globally that kind of help you to deliver your strategy? Is it?
So there's 664 total within the workplace operations team. Focused specifically on technologies, 305, and then if you break that out, there's 131 that are focused specifically in the operations, and that is all of our IT and AV strategy across the world.
And that's a fantastic team. And there are other organizations who have a handful, and the poor guys are trying to deploy a global strategy on their own. So I guess some organizations are building their global strategy internally, and others have to seek partners externally to try and help them.
To try to balance it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, is that what we're finding, Bill? I mean, how sophisticated are customers to realise the importance of this stuff?
Well, some are quite sophisticated. We talk our platform being a monitoring and management solution. We'll go and we'll talk about what is the managed service provider strategy. And I was in a large financial institution. They said, we are the service provider. We are going to be the ones that need the information. I need to be able to see the status of all my spaces right here, right now. I need to respond to trouble tickets as they happen. So we are the managed service provider. And then there are others that have clearly said that's not our business. We can't be in that. We have already strategically said that we are going to reduce that internal cost by shifting that to a managed service provider. And then there's some that they don't know. I mean, and there's probably more of that group who just have not yet developed a strategy as it pertains to AV on how they're going to support it continuously.
No, I mean, Abdul, do you think you need to have this as sort of prerequisite, if you like,
Right.
before you start thinking more globally about what you're doing. You've got to get the basics right, get a proper infrastructure in place, presumably.
Right.
Because we're dealing with a complex combination of equipment all behaving in different ways, some of it proprietary, some of it open. And actually measuring and judging effectiveness of how this works, in fact how it works at all in the right way, just keeping track of what's going on
Right.
is probably a necessary requirement for a start.
And I think when we talk global standardization, and I'm on the manufacturing side, so it's a lot more than most of the times you run into enterprise accounts. Not everybody gets it, right?
Yep.
You still have people who say, hey, we are standardized on AV, we use Cisco SX80.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
Right.
So we on our side as a manufacturer, I've been doing global standardization with enterprise accounts for the last 15 years. And I think we look at someone like this, that an entity that has the infrastructure has realized that this is business critical, this data is important, we are losing money whether on resources or energy or whatever have you, and then they have a strategy that they're rolling out. So what we do is then we look at the overall experience they're trying to build for their customers. And you have to understand, some, like Bill mentioned, are way ahead of the curve, and some are just realizing and starting, and we have to cater for all of them.
What are the pitfalls you come across? What do they do in the early days that may not be quite right? I mean, you don't need to name anybody, obviously.
Absolutely
but
not.
sort of things that they should be aware of, and perhaps potential danger areas.
So there's, depending on where, so one of the major issues I find in enterprise accounts is people understand the importance of global standardization, importance of experience for their end user internally. They have internal organizational challenges to push that strategy globally. Somebody in Australia still does their own thing.
Yeah.
And then you find out that, they deployed the systems we didn't know, and now I have to support them. So the biggest challenge that I have found in last year, if you have an organization where you have somebody like him who's championing global standardization, experience of their end users, is leveraging data, that organization is golden for me, because they are the customers who understand it. And then you have the rest that you have to educate during the process. You have to help them, you have to guide them. Very simple things back in the day, like you standardization, you want the same user experience if of touch panel or control system or using a space, but no single display manufacturer makes a display that works the same way in India, China, Singapore, and the US. So how you give them the same experience becomes a major challenge in deployment globally. So things of that nature, manufacturing side, we kind of look at it. We look at our software strategy from enterprise perspective. We look at our support strategy from our global enterprise perspective, and then we put that program together that works for someone as advanced as Bloomberg in their thought process, or someone who's just starting out. So we then that's the thought process we move forward with.
Because there's conflict of words here really between best practice approach to doing something and standards, which are essentially something quite different. And we bandy these words around, don't we? Standardization and best practice approach. I mean, which is it? Is it a sensible approach based on what a number of companies have done? They found the best way of doing this is this for their particular market or their size of organization, or is it a sort of set of clear standards we can put in place that are to actually follow, we can actually conform as a model?
Yeah, so
Which is it?
I wish I could answer that, right? So if you talk to one enterprise, their standards is what their enterprise, their internal customer experience is standard. Someone says to me, hey, I want to come in, I want to collaborate and leave. I don't want to touch anything. I don't want to bring anything. Software knows I'm scheduled for a collaboration session in this room. Everything else knows, my bridge knows, why do I need to even touch anything? I'm going to come in, the room needs to recognize me, who I am. Collaboration, I'll do my session and I'll leave. And if I don't come, the room is released from my scheduled pool. And if I show up, the data is there that I'm going to do it. So that's the experience. Someone says to me, this is what I'm looking for. How can you help me deliver that?
I think
Yeah.
the problem with best practices and standards is it's a set moment in time. And if we don't continually look at the user experience and how that user is actually needing the technology to support them and their business, and how we support them throughout their journey, what happens when they run into a problem. If we don't look at that user experience and we don't evolve our best practices, you can make the most amazing standard system today,
Yep.
and 2 weeks from now, it's out of date and the users don't use it.
See, this is the problem I have, and I know you probably don't jump on it, is that we are going through now the AV industry, this now focusing towards service and everything else. Everybody's geared out to selling kit, selling and making kit work effectively and as best as they can as possible. When you're into the world of user experience and into soft services and expertise that you may not necessarily have as an integrator, for example, you know, you're into an area which has a longer sales cycle, more analysis and everything else, and it's a completely different business model, isn't it, for the industry to try and support. I'm just wondering, you know, everybody says they're a national or global integrator and everything else, so having come from the IT side in, I can see how much is involved in terms. They're very different companies. So the ones I see evolving from the AV side, which are much smaller, they're acquiring skills. I mean, where are the AV guys going to be? I say you're presumably employing people outside the AV industry, from the IT industry, presumably.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we are short of really AV guys as it is, you know, to do the basics and the elements of creativity and everything else. Are we just working, is our whole AV model changing, and are we able to operate it efficiently and effectively? That's my worry. You know, because we come from a very different world, and we're now being thrust into an extremely fast-moving, you know, making money in different ways type of world, which AV historically has not been used to.
Yeah. I would say this. Yes, the AV world the landscape has completely changed. In my opinion, from what I see from my vantage point, it's changed. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you're an AV, you know, I grew up analog board. Alan Heath was my first mixing console. I mean, just I have fun, great, wonderful memories of mixing live shows.
Saw one just the other day, actually.
And they're a lot different than they were when I started.
So
that's 22 years ago. But anyway, but you know, and it was okay to understand the analog world. Now, if you're an AV, you know, professional and you don't understand the digital world, you don't understand network topology, you don't understand what an SNMP trap is and why it's important to make sure that you understand TCP/IP protocols, then you're not going to be an effective IT person at least in the enterprise. At least at scale, you're just not going to be. And so when you take, and I think Biamp's a great example of this, when you take this new world, I'm going to say two distinct things. One is when you take the new world, especially in the IT space, the TCP/IP space, and you overlay the AV technology in that space, that's a whole new paradigm of skill sets that you need to have. That is your foundation, right? Every building needs a foundation. It can be the Louvre, or it can be the Shard, or it can be the Empire State Building. All of them have foundations. Wildly different buildings, but all of them have foundations. Okay. Then the other thing I want to say is that we are now in the world of user experience. We are now in the world. My job every day is to curate from the moment a guest or an employee walks into our space. Actually, when they're on the street, before they walk into our space, they open that door to the moment they consume all of our wonderful things at Bloomberg, and then they leave. My job is to curate that entire experience and make sure that it is seamless and is wonderful, and that we deliver our brand, our reputation, and with the productivity that user expects, no matter what building they walk into anywhere in the world. In order for me to do that, the standards I have to put to the side for a second, and curate the experience. And then from that, the experience I want to create, I then build that foundation, which is based off of the standards. I can't say, like, I'm never going to put a camera in a conference room because that's not the user experience I want to create. But I have to say, my user experience will be that they walk in the room and that everything turns on and works. The foundation, how I will achieve that is I'll go look at the industry and I'll go find a partner. Maybe not the biggest, but it'll be the small and agile firm that can develop and build with me. I'll throw my programmers at it, they'll throw their programmers at it. We may create something that never existed before, but we'll do that together in support of the experience. That's the pivot, that's the change. It's no longer it's no longer Cisco's going to define my experience. It's funny, I'm not trying to knock on Cisco or anybody, but it's funny when you go to the vendors and they say, I've got your user experience. How do you have my user experience? You don't know my users. No. And my user experience probably isn't your user experience, and it isn't your user experience. Right. They're all great experiences, but I'm trying to make a unique experience. So you can't sell me my experience. I have to create my experience. Right. Now I have to have the data and the power and the ability to articulate that experience so I can get the technology to support it. But the technology is in support of the experience, not the experience.
Absolutely.
That's the difference.
And this is the thing I think the industry needs to understand, is the whole relationship between the user base and the customer rather, and the industry itself in how it develops and designs and supplies products, and the way it carries out the relationship to the users has to change. I mean, you had a very good model, the way you managed the HQ in London and how the relationship you had with manufacturers and so on, who were probably selling a very different product, the one you eventually implemented and put in. That seemed to be an amazing achievement. And I think are we working towards that thing, that sort of experience where the relationship is changing into not too bespoke a sort of relationship, but it's going to take more time to actually, instead of selling a vanilla product into everything and just assuming it's going to work, and one of the biggest installing beefs is that products don't work out of the box in the way they should do, is that now we're in much more complex environments, different requirements are going to be made of them, and therefore they need to tailor them into the environment they're selling. And they think, well, I'll only do that. I'll only do that for a big customer. Why should I bother with a small one? Type of attitude. But if you feel the manufacturers coming slightly closer to wanting to get closer to customers, to how they think, operate, and so on. Notice that on a number of people I've spoken to here at the show, for example, they changed their outlook. Christie, for example, is changing it complete with a new head guy. Same with Shaw. Both incidentally former engineers. Different mindset is creeping in. The sales guys who used to run these large companies are still there, but you're seeing an engineering mindset coming in slowly, slightly across the board, which has a different view of how customers, how technologies are innovative, how they're innovative, the whole process, and how they include the customer base into providing what they require much more closely than they ever used to. And therefore they're having to think about commercially where their base sits. Are they going to make as much money out of it? How much more is it going to take? Is the supply chain the right way? Is it set up in the right way, and so on? This is a very complex thing coming at the same time as technology itself is changing itself and working together in different ways. That's a tough gig for the AV industry to take on, isn't it?
The mindset needs to be Legos, right? Like when I started my career, it was, I want to build a Mustang. So I'm going to go buy the model kit for Mustang, and at the end of it, if I follow the directions, I'm going to have an exact replica of a Mustang, right? And that worked. Now it's, I'm going to get a box of Legos, and I'm going to build whatever, and halfway through building that model of the Mustang, it's not going to look exactly like a Mustang, but it's going to have the shape and the form, and it's going to generally look like a Mustang. You're going to be able to tell it's a Mustang, but it's comprised of individual building blocks. The concept of RESTful APIs built into your technology stack. The concept of building a platform that I can program against, as opposed to an end-all be-all solution application that I have to consume in the way you design me to consume. That's the paradigm shift, right? If you come to me, and I'll be quiet after this, I know we're talking a lot. If you come to me with here's my solution front to back, and you have to consume it the way I want you to consume it, the way I designed the user to consume it, I walk away from that product. But if you tell me, here's the solution, but here's all the SDKs attached to it, here are all the APIs you can plug into it, here's the application, the programming interface, the API that you can build whatever client on top that you want to build, customize to your user experience, and you can take advantage of all the feature sets that we've got. Not like I've got 2 APIs to turn it on and turn off, but actual suite, a library that you can actually program against. then
That's the fun part.
then we can have a conversation. And I think the last, and this is my last comment, I think that is where the money, when you're looking at the economics, that's where the shift is. It means that instead of just having sales guys who are going to sell a catalog, you're going to have architects and engineers and technologists who are going to be able to partner with the enterprise and have a long relationship.
Solutions.
Solutions.
Yeah.
So it's, I'm not going to hire you and buy 10 widgets from you and be done with you. Rather, we're going to have a 2-year relationship. And you're going to come in and you're going to understand my data. And we're going to work together. And I'm going to pay you every month for that relationship rather than that single exchange. And at the end of it, we may force you to create a new product, or we may buy a product that already exists, but we're going to be damn sure that that product is the right one because we're going to have worked together for the last year to do it. And you know what? I'm probably not going to go to somebody else 2 years later because I've got this deep-seated relationship now, and you really understand it. I'm not going to start again. That's where the power is in this new model, in my opinion.
I was going to say, Clive, what really helped us to move from being a dealer to being a service provider was in those enterprise accounts. We have teams on the floor running people's services for them, so we get to see that user experience playing out in the meeting room or in the event space. And so those guys, we then realized they're actually at the front end of our service in a way. So those guys are helping us to get the right designs to support the customer's vision. So we're bringing that user experience in from the fact that we've got guys on the floor seeing how that customer's people are working. I think the other thing I thought was probably worth mentioning though was, I think one of the most helpful things that we did for some of these enterprise customers is we have an online platform that enables them to take their visions for these experiences and capture them in a very dynamic way. So when we go into a project, it could be in India, it could be in Australia, it could be in Mexico, wherever in the world. We're able to sit with the group of IT guys, facilities guys, their architects, their M&E guys, and say, let's say it's a boardroom. We actually go online on the big screen and we'll say, these are the core user experience principles that the customer's looking. So, it might be that some of the technical detail has to change because you've got an antique table, so you can't drill out a microphone, right? Yeah. But what you're trying to make sure is when that boardroom is used, the directors can do the following things. And if they mute a microphone in Mexico, it's going to have the same effect as the boardroom in Hong Kong. Or when they plug a laptop in, it's going to do the same thing. So it's about standardizing your user experiences. So we capture that with photos, with explanations, and then of course we back it up with, well, here's a template you could use technically. There might be schematics, there might be power M&E drawings, and we find if you have got your standards that dynamic and well explained, then the local teams tend to go, that's great, we'll do that. If your standard is too open, then it kind of gives people a bit of room to start saying, okay, well, I like that bit, but I'm going to change something over here. So that one thing to build that very dynamic, and of course, because we've all said the standards or your user experiences are evolving and changing, so being online is fantastic because then you've got a completely up-to-date design experience for everybody.
But is product design and functionality going to have to change to accommodate this? I can't help but think the products themselves are going to have to become more intelligent and flexible. And this only works. I mean, you can't expect the AV guys, or whoever it is in an enterprise, to be able to think of everything, even according to the best template. You want an element of potential intuitivity, if that's the word I'm looking for, coming through in intelligence. The machine itself automatically thinks, oh, that's not quite right. Those parameters aren't in there, therefore it should be operating like this. It takes the grunt work out, and it's probably software-based, a bit of it machine learning perhaps rather than AI, that attaches and works to closely cooperating groups of. This is where I think more technology manufacturers will operate more closely together to create these things. Everybody's a level of interoperability that we have sort of in the IT world, but certainly not in AV, that allows you to just have the environment itself adapts according to what's required when you do it at a very machine sort of level, not too sophisticated. So this is where your infrastructure will probably come into your IoT, which will actually start to think about this and start to operate more so. I just think all this is getting so complex, you can't expect teams to provide uniformity all over the place, making sure one operates to another and performs in the same way. It's just impossible. You can't expect people to do that.
Well, like
and I can see all this
Clive,
complexity coming our way, and it's getting very complex. And I think you expect some functionality in the way products are designed to be able to accommodate some of that. Perhaps.
Clive's always 5 years ahead of the game.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely spot on, aren't you? Because you're talking about, in a way, creating a service that helps to develop, how you deliver the user experience, which is that step ahead of just having a product. So
correct. And I think going two steps back, you mentioned changing. I think one of the main things you need to look at is all of this experience runs on the network. So if as an organization, the reason this group that I'm running is created global enterprise accounts is to understand the experience you're trying to create, understand the IT requirements and security requirements behind that. Because like you said, if I don't understand what an SNMP trap is and what you are using in your environment to monitor and how my RESTful API will integrate with that and what data you're looking for from my product perspective. Even it's just you need to know what the temperature of the box is. I really don't care, but can I provide that? So it's a two-way street. I am providing him that, okay, this is what the tool set I have. How does it fit the experience you're trying to create? But at the same time, I have to grow and evolve and change as well with the enterprise. So that feedback inside the organization is coming from people like him. Till I create that long-term partnership, we will be left behind. Because the world is going to change. Where if you don't change with it, you are left behind. Simple as that. There's no rocket science in it. So our whole focus in this is the global enterprise strategy is a two-way street. We are working with enterprises and looking at what experiences they're trying to create, what standards they are trying to create. Is it a standard experience? Is it an entry-level standard of just boxes? And how do we work with each one of them? And then how do we get the industry feedback into Biamp and see where is this world going? So we are ahead of the curve as well. So we can create. So if I'm looking at my product management, they are talking to people like him in the field and understanding their requirements, and then thinking about how does my product fit. There are projects, I'm talking to people who are going to put their project 5 years from now in Hudson Yard or wherever that's happening. But they're talking to us today. That's the partnership that we put together from global enterprise account perspective, just to work together. It's not just thought process of how I'm going to sell him a box or how am I going to deliver that box in Timbuktu, for example. That's the very nitty-gritty entry-level details, but what that box is going to do for him 5 years from now, from today.
Well, the costing process must be it's getting quite complex, isn't it? How do you cost all this? How do you cost a product and a service over a long term? You're talking about large-scale developments over 4 or 5 years, and over that's a big commitment. And budgetary-wise,
like
takes some
the
thinking
service,
about.
the product, and the data. Now, all of these businesses have the opportunity to have a completely new revenue stream that they've not thought about before. And I will tell you right now, if I'm looking at a competitor and I've got two things and the feature sets are the same and the price is relatively close, but one can deliver me data, that's more valuable. I'll buy that. I'll buy that every single time than the exact. If I got one camera that's just a camera and one camera that's a camera that tells me data, I'm going to get the camera that tells me data, because the more that is value. That is value add to me. And the more data I can get and I can synthesize and I can learn from and build intelligence from, that's what I want. And to your point about the ML, we are, this is kind of secret, but not that secret because I'm about to tell everybody.
No one else is listening.
Nobody else is listening. Just me and a couple thousand of our closest friends. We have a thing called Infosys Labs. And it has nothing to do with Infosys, the company Infosys, but that's our internal name for information systems at Bloomberg. And in Infosys Labs, we've built a modeler that use machine learning to build collaboration spaces based on data points that we get from laptops. So we have our wireless access points. We know the laptops. We know the traffic that's being used on those. We have monitoring devices that allow us to know what applications are running. We don't know what you're doing in the application, but we know what applications are running. We know where your wireless phone is. And so we started building models around how our employees are huddling together what they're doing when they huddle together, what tools and technologies they're using when they huddle together, and we let this software program that we developed run and just say, hey, build a room based on these data points of what you think this collaboration room could be. Now the first pass was a little weird. It was, like an octagon, and it was like a death trap kind of thing. There was no doors and no windows, and it was kind of crazy. But as it's learned and continued to develop, it's actually developed some pretty cool spaces. And we're actually building out on one of our new builds in New York. We're building out a floor that's based on this data set model.
That's cool.
To test it out, to see if, hey, an application, does this really actually make sense, based on the real world use of our employees, that same bucket of employees being in that space.
Hearing ESI Design yesterday at the Tide conference talking about data analysis, really helping to design environments and reinforcing the presence elements of those environments, and not just from the basic wallpaper design, but also making the environment itself more intuitive and more predictive, matching it very much to human behaviour and actions. And even there, I suppose they're an architecturally based practice, but creative agency nevertheless. And, in between the client and the integrators on the technical side of things. But interesting element of thinking that, I think, well, there are so many points that need to be joined up. Is the industry itself joined up enough to supply it?
I would say.
Are we getting more closer relationships going on here?
In some camps, yes, but I also see a lot of fences. A lot of companies saying me only. All you need is our one solution.
A lot of big ones.
For everything you need. You don't ignore everything else, just come here.
A bit of consolidation about to go on, I suspect. We're seeing that in other areas, aren't we?
Bill,
Absolutely.
you were talking about Avixa's efforts to standardize some of those data APIs, right?
Absolutely.
And that sounded really exciting to me.
Yeah, so there are a number of, so on the Manufacturers Council, it's saying we need to open. Everything needs to be open. And from a software publisher, I mean, that's glorious to hear, right? So we want everyone's products to be as open as possible. I mean, we publish all of our APIs across the platform. We want everybody else to do the same, because I don't know your experience. I don't know the solution necessarily that you need for your environment, so why dictate it to you, right? So I have this very open platform, and other platforms like Biamp's REST APIs are glorious, but not everybody is that way. And trying to educate those other manufacturers to think differently, say, open up more of your REST APIs and build into your platform intelligence that people are really desperate for. I mean, we're desperate for just simple things like, is the device on? Because I can't get that from everything. But getting past that, once we get into the deeper stuff, I want that as well. And then saying, all right, so you've thought like a AV company for a long time, great, lots of really good features. Let's talk about security. How is your product secure? You would be surprised, or maybe not so much, how many technologies in our world, Telnet is the only way for us to communicate to it, right? So why haven't we adopted things like SSH and HTTPS as just a standard across our product sets as we come to market with them?
Yeah.
And so we're sitting with manufacturers and saying, you made the leap on the APIs with us, and that was fantastic. Make the next leap with us and provide secure sockets. So we're trying to help educate the other manufacturers in the space, but when you start to build up walls, I mean, that's to me, that's a non-starter.
Yeah, this whole security thing's kind of worms, isn't it? It's just
from one of the points you brought up, like from data perspective, like you deploy a voice over IP solution, for example. Someone would love to find out how many calls happened in a year, what the quality of the calls was, how many got dropped, how many didn't go through. Some maybe there are. It's a very simple example. I'm just making it up as I go. But that kind of data, where you have, whether it's on echo cancellation in a room, whether it's any other device in the room from perspective, but that data it exists inside the box. There's a software in it. There's a firmware in it that exists. But for manufacturers to understand what's important to you, that relationship has to happen, that global enterprise relationship between manufacturers, and whether you're using software or whatever other manufacturers you're using. We have certain clients where they have brought partners together to the table. You guys will work together.
I've done that. They're very awkward conversations sometimes. Which
those walls exist, but sometimes the enterprise comes into the middle of it and say, guys, play nice.
Yep.
Because this is what data what I want out of your device. This is the device I'm going to use to connect to your device. Make it happen.
Yep.
So sometimes, but I personally agree that in order for AV to improve and see the vision where it needs to go, those barriers have to come down.
To not least build that data story, and it's that data story that allows people like Jeff to go finance initiatives and so on. So for many AV managers, I guess they can often have a lot of executives who are very unhappy about the meeting spaces, but for some reason it doesn't turn into budget to make them better. And I suspect it's often because they haven't had that data to put together that investment case that feels, solid and well researched. So if Bill can help get, multi-vendor data coming together, analytics get better, investment gets higher, happy days.
It's very simple. I'll show my age here. 25 years ago, I worked for an enterprise, and I managed conference spaces, and I put up like a $500,000 auditorium somewhere. And 6 months later, projector lamp was like xenon lamp for $5,000. Some microphones were broken, another $5,000. So I go for a budget. Guys, wait, you just put a $500,000 room. You're asking for money again? I had no data to back up that how many hours was it used. Simple thing I needed. I said, guys, how many hours was this auditorium used? What usage did we get out of it? We don't know. How much was it booked? I don't know. How many people came in through it? I don't know. I'm like, oh shoot. So we very at the basic level said each time somebody turns the touch panel on and says shut down, I want you to log that time for me. That was 20 years ago when I was asking for this data that I need to know, because I have to go to my CTO and say, hey guys, you bought a car, it has done its 3,000 miles, I need an oil change. You put that $500,000 room, now I need to change a lamp in it. This is the usage I got out of it. So that data requirement was 20 years ago.
The power that Bill's organization brings is this idea of, and now you can get that. You go to projector vendor 1A, they can give you the data on they've got a management system that gives you the data on that. But if you want to also look at projector B, well then you got to use their management system, because projector A's management system doesn't talk to projector B. Why don't you talk to them? And the other thing is, from an executive perspective, when I get my team together around the world, every Monday and every Friday, we do what we call MMR. So it's our monthly metrics review, and we do it every week, even though we call it monthly. We do it every week, and I look at all of the only thing we talk about is I have a dashboard, and each one of those dashboards is a line of business, and there are key performance indicators that we track, and you have to speak to the data. And if it's positive or negative, you have to speak to the data, and whoever's responsible for that business line or that specific piece of KPI has to speak to that data. That's how I manage my team, through the data. I don't want your interpretation of what happened. I want to see the data as to what happened, and then you give me color as to why we went up or down in this specific area. That's the starting point. And building those ROI cases becomes exponentially easier when I can go and say, you know what, I want a new initiative and I need to hire 5 people to do a new initiative. But you know what, I'm going to self-fund those 5 people. I'm not going to ask you for 5 additional heads, a management committee. Rather, I'm going to find the efficiency within my team to deliver those 5 heads by automating these processes, by eliminating these processes, by combining these 2 vendors that don't talk to each other, or I have someone schedule conferences all day long. That job's not going to go away anymore because we're going to combine those 2, and I'm going to use that person to fund this other initiative. So, for example, there's 131 people in the operating group. Of that, there are 20 people that are dedicated around the world focused on AV, right? We do 498,000 video conference calls last month. That's what we did, 498,000. We did 17.2 million minutes of video conference talk time in the month of May. That's what we did. There is not one person in the entire world of Bloomberg dedicated to our video conferencing infrastructure. Those are all started and ended by end users and completed by end users. Entirely. That's it. Not one person. Now, we started with a bunch of people, and we've gotten ourselves to that model. But scheduling, starting the meeting, and then ending the meeting is all done by the end user. And that's how you drive up adoption. to get yourself with a 19,000 person employee population to have 498,000 calls and 17.2 million minutes of talk time per month. To be able to get that, you really got to think holistically about that user experience. But then I could take those 20 resources and focus them, that were AV dedicated resources, and focus them on other activities. And so I go back to the business and I say, I just created 5 heads. Thank you very much.
And you know what? We had a building in New York. We were doing a proof of concept, and goes back to talking to the customer what they're doing. And they had 30 floors. They had 5 guys. And they said, oh, well, we do a technology sweep of every floor. Okay, what does that mean? So we physically go into every room. We look at the microphones are plugged in, the touch panel is plugged in, all this app. I'm like, how many hours are you spending? Well, we're spending this many hours. And he said, okay, let me help you out. Install the software, said, install it, monitor it, end of the day, it will spit out a report for you that these things are online or not. And at the end of that proof of concept, this is a very small application of a few floors. I was able to give them that you can save, just this free application can save you 49 hours a week.
Boom.
For more than 40 hours per week in New York.
That's a person.
That's a person for you.
That's a person.
Right. So, and by the way, just to go back, we do talk very nicely to each other.
Yes. We could go on like this for another hour at least, probably, but we're going to have to call it a day, unfortunately. But thank you very much, Bill, Jeff, John, and Abdul. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Was it very useful for you? I know fascinating channel. I wish we could get them together more often. They're great, aren't they? Thank you very much.